Tonight, a horrifying crime scene in Ottawa. A family of newcomers murdered inside their home.
This was a senseless act of violence perpetrated on purely innocent people.
A mother and her 4 young children among the dead. What we know about the suspect, now charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. At issue, is Saskatchewan taking a stand on the carbon tax or breaking the law?
It's irresponsible and it's frankly immoral.
If the decision is immoral in Saskatchewan, that means it's immoral in Atlantic Canada.
And the people who teach the rules of the road caught breaking the rules.
Hi, I have an appointment here.
What Marketplace hidden cameras uncovered that has a province promising action.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. Tragic details are emerging tonight about the mass killing that has shaken an Ottawa suburb. A townhouse transformed into a crime scene after 5 family members and another resident were found dead. We now know the youngest victim was just 2 months old and her father was the sole survivor of the attack. As he recovers in hospital, a suspect is behind bars and police are on the hunt for answers. So they have not said what may have motivated the attack, only that it was senseless. Nicole Williams takes us through what we know tonight about how it all unfolded.
A normally quiet suburban neighborhood in Ottawa's South End, now dealing with a nightmare.
Like a family moving from Sri Lanka to here with such a young family with young kids, they probably had a lot of hopes and dreams. So it's very sad.
They lived here in the townhouse where late Wednesday night, police found 6 people dead, including 35-year-old Darshani Delanthaka Akanayaki and her 4 young children, 7-year-old Inika, 4-year-old Ashwini, 2-year-old Rinyana, and 2-month-old Kelly. The other victim, 40-year-old Gamini Amarakon, who was living with the family.
This one will undoubtedly weigh on the hearts of everyone for a long time.
The only survivor was Danushka Wikramasinghe, the children's father. Neighbors saw him screaming in the driveway, asking for help. He was rushed to hospital with serious injuries. A monk at the family's Buddhist monastery has been to visit him.
I cannot say he's doing well, but he's a little bit stronger than we thought. And he's with some injuries and mentally he's in great shock.
Police have arrested Fabio De Zoisa, who also lived in the home. He has now appeared in court, charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. They allege he attacked the victims with an edged weapon. Police say he's an international student, new to Canada, also from Sri Lanka. Bante Sunita says the family recently celebrated his 19th birthday.
He asked the family that he liked to eat even cheesecake. They even provide that, they bought, and they provided everything for make him happy.
As the investigation continues, the community now coming to grips with the horror of what happened.
I'm obviously in shock, and I can't explain it. It's tough.
Did you know them?
No, I didn't, but I'm seeing it, seeing the guys in their white suits and everything. It's more real now.
So, Nicole, you're at the local park where people gathered together tonight for that vigil. What are you hearing from people there?
Yes, well, dozens of people have been streaming into this park over the course of the evening. And the few people that we have spoken to say just how devastated they are. But many people have been coming here to lay down candles, flowers, notes, teddy bears, all in honors of the victim. And many of them standing silently to reflect on really what happened here today. City officials are saying to check in on each other and their loved ones as police really just try to make sense of exactly why this happened.
Indeed. All right, Nicole Williams in Ottawa, thank you. Ottawa Mayor Mark Sutcliffe joins us now. I'm really sorry we're having this conversation, Mr. Mayor. And as mayor, you have to be rattled. We understand first responders are certainly shaken. So how are you? And what are you hearing tonight about how people are doing?
Thank you, Adrienne. It's been a very, very tough day. And I think for everyone in the community, they're just shaken by the events, especially the fact that not only have 6 people been killed, but 4 of those are children, and they're young children. And speaking to you, not just as mayor, but as a father, I'm thinking about the man who is in hospital tonight and has lost his whole family. And I cannot even begin to imagine what he's going through, but I've spoken with a lot of other parents and members of the community today who are sympathizing greatly with that individual and who are hoping and praying for him and are just devastated by this news that has really shaken our community.
So you now have this community that's really hurting, and as you said, a husband and father who's lost everything. What do you do now as a city? What do you do next?
We have to pull together as a community. Ottawa is a very safe city, and we're fortunate to live in a community that is largely free from this kind of violence. And this is an isolated incident. The police are saying there is no continuing security threat or threat to public safety. So we have to pull together as a community and support each other. A lot of people will have been affected by this, including neighbors and people close to the family and children in schools where some of the young members of this family went to school. We must pull together and support each other. Tomorrow, I'm hosting a breakfast for International Women's Day, and we're going to observe a moment of silence. And I'm encouraging other Ottawa residents and workplaces and community organizations to find their own way to show their support for this family and for the Sri Lankan community in Ottawa, and to demonstrate their solidarity by observing a moment of silence or demonstrating their support in some other way.
All right, Mayor Sutcliffe, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
We can also tell you more tonight about the Ontario family who died in a plane crash in Nashville on Monday. The pilot was Victor Dotsenko. He was on board with his wife Rima and their 3 kids, David, Adam, and Emma. The children were between 7 and 12 years old. A manager at the family's flying club tells CBC News Victor was an amateur pilot who flew as a hobby. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. It's a critical night in Washington tonight. U.S. President Joe Biden gave a fiery State of the Union address and delivered his message for the future of the nation.
The very idea of America is that we're all created equal and deserves to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I won't walk away from it now.
So this was Biden's 3rd and final State of the Union before the next presidential election. The address is viewed widely as a pivotal moment for the current president to reassure voters he is able to lead the country for 4 more years. Katie Simpson is inside the U.S. Capitol building for us tonight. So, Katie, Biden pulled no punches when it came to his political rival.
President Joe Biden used his State of the Union address to deliver a scathing attack on his political opponent, Donald Trump. He didn't mention Trump by name, just repeatedly referring to him as his predecessor, but truly offered American voters a preview of what the next 8 months is going to look like on the federal election campaign trail. Biden was fired up, going after Trump for his positions on Russia, some of the comments he's made about Vladimir Putin, going after him for his positions on reproductive rights, with Roe versus Wade being overturned because of the appointment of conservative justice by Donald Trump, and going after Trump for what happened on January 6th.
January 6th lies about the 2020 election and the plots to steal the election posed a gravest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War. But they failed. America stood. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win.
And Katie, for many people, it's not just what Biden had to say tonight, but really how he delivered his speech.
He was fired up, he was shouting, he was angry, and anger sometimes has a way of looking energetic, and he really leaned into that. Republicans coming out of this speech telling us that it was far too political, that this was more of a campaign speech than a State of the Union address, and they're frustrated with that, they're furious with that. But of course, this is to be expected. This is what happens in a U.S. election campaign. Joe Biden is facing a lot of criticism and concern from voters. They're worried he is simply too old to do this job. He is not mentally fit to continue in this stressful, highly important job, to say the least. Tonight, he is trying to deliver a message to voters that that's not the case, trying to look energetic and ready to fight.
All right, Katie Simpson in Washington for us tonight. Now, Joe Biden also touched on the Israel-Hamas war and announced the building of a temporary port to funnel aid into Gaza. The proposal is for military engineers to build a pier on the Gaza coast. Aid will be inspected by Israel at a staging area in Cyprus, but the plan could take weeks to execute. Margaret Evans is back in the region in Jerusalem for us tonight. So, Margaret, this Gaza port announcement is already getting some reaction tonight.
Adrian, we know that Israeli officials were actually in Cyprus back in December talking about some kind of maritime humanitarian corridor. We're hearing that the European Union has been involved in the planning. But there are so many questions. How long is it going to take? How would it be distributed once it actually reaches the shores of Gaza? And critics say if Washington really wants aid to get in a hurry, then it should be pressing the Israeli government much harder than it has been.
And really, whatever impact this aid route ends up having, obviously the need is crystal clear.
That's right. And it's really not just about the huge number of Gazans being killed in the conflict. It's also about the impact of the war on a healthcare system absolutely on its knees.
The struggle to survive turns on many levels in Gaza. Here, in a Deir al-Balah health clinic, dialysis machines separate toxins from the systems of patients whose kidneys no longer can. But the treatments are cut short due to lack of water, and they can't stop the war outside, bleeding through the lives of so many Gazans. This woman tells a freelance videographer working for CBC News that she lost 4 children when her house was bombed. Outside, desperation on the ground is driving desperate measures from the sky. Airdrops from Jordan, Egypt, the United States. Britain's foreign minister says he knows it's not enough.
If we want to avoid famine, if we want to avoid disease, if we want to help people in Gaza, we need 500 trucks a day.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says to agree to a ceasefire would be to allow the Hamas militants who killed some 1,200 Israelis on October 7th to win and to abandon the hostages they still hold. A recent report commissioned by the British Foreign Office warns that Gaza's healthcare system is so ravaged that even with an immediate ceasefire, thousands of excess deaths would continue in Gaza for months.
And if the trajectory stays the same in terms of how much food people are getting, then our models project that the rates of acute malnutrition in children particularly would skyrocket and become really catastrophic.
Francesco Checchi is one of the report's co-authors.
Even acute malnutrition in the short term is really difficult to reverse. It's a bit like a super tanker that you're trying to slow down, right?
The study looked not just at acute trauma, but at disease and underlying health issues no longer treatable because of the war. Hada Al-Shafi was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019 and was treated at the one specialist hospital in Gaza. No longer there. May God support my kids, she says. I want to see them succeed, see my daughters get married.
Adrian, people in Gaza say that the longer this goes on, the harder it is for them to hang on to any kind of a hope that offers them a future that they can imagine.
All right, Margaret Evans in Jerusalem for us tonight. Back at home, the RCMP is apologizing for not properly investigating a sexual assault allegation more than 20 years ago. The woman who received that apology is now speaking out to CBC News. As Catherine Tunney explains, thousands of other cases are being re-examined too.
So this is a photo taken a few months before I was assaulted.
Jennifer Johnner doesn't have many photos of herself smiling as a teenager. When she was 14, she was assaulted.
He made sexual advances, which I did not want. He punched me in the mouth, causing severe dental damage.
But Johnner says the Mountie who responded back in 2001 was impatient, left her in the ER alone, and never investigated. Eventually, Johnner's smile returned. But emotionally, she's still wounded.
Having the person that you think will help you dismiss me was something that I carried to this day.
As an adult, she decided to push back by filing an official complaint. Recently, she received this letter.
On behalf of the RCMP, I wish to convey to you my regret over this oversight.
More than 20 years later, an apology for failing to properly investigate.
Have I been healed by anything that the RCMP has done or said? No. But advocating for myself and getting recognition that I am a victim was vital.
Johnner is not alone. Since 2017, the RCMP has reviewed tens of thousands of old cases and uncovered what it calls consistent deficiencies. Of those filed, 200 have been reopened, leading to 26 new charges. Work is now underway to review cases involving minors. It's why advocates want to see more transparency from police to this day.
Because we know about 4 out of 5 reports to police of sexual assault don't proceed to charges. And that's hugely concerning.
Johnner's message to the RCMP is simple.
I want them to learn that the choices that they make in the field have lasting results.
She also has one for victims. Keep fighting, even decades later. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now to a Marketplace investigation exposing how driving instructors and schools in Ontario are breaking the rules, putting money ahead of safety. Asha Tomlinson with what our hidden cameras found and why the province is now promising to crack down.
How are the nerves, Ashley?
I've only ever driven with my parents.
Okay.
This is Ashley Griffith's first driving lesson.
So remember, always keep your hands on the wheel, right, at all times, right? So
Griffith is taking a beginner driver education course in Ontario, also known as BDE. She has to complete a total of 40 hours of in-car and in-class lessons to get her certificate. That can get her a discount on car insurance. She can also take her driving exam sooner. But in our investigation, we found out of the 20 driving instructors we contacted, 14 were willing to help forge documents and sell BDE certificates for cheap, with no lessons completed. One told us we can get it right away.
Okay, so if I e-transfer you, how much? $150?
$155.
And yeah. I can get it by today?
Yes, you're gonna get it today in the evening, maybe tonight.
Hi. I have an appointment here.
And when we visited one driving school undercover, they explained in detail how this scheme works.
The short version is that you sign as if you've already completed everything and get certificates right now.
And you have done this before, right?
For about 15 years now.
Okay.
Wow. For quite some time.
We revealed our findings to Ontario's Minister of Transportation, Prabmeet Sarkaria. He's now promising to increase sanctions.
When you say sanctions, what do you mean by that?
Well, we're always looking at penalties. We want to make sure that bad actors are punished for any type of behavior that is not in line with the rules and regulations. And so we will have zero tolerance for any event.
The tolerance may be zero, but the timeline is less clear. The minister did not say what those penalties could look like or when these changes will come. Asha Tomlinson, CBC News, Toronto.
So you can watch the entire Marketplace investigation Friday. That's at 8 p.m., 8:30 in Newfoundland on CBC Gem and CBC Television. Nova Scotia wineries say a new plan by the province could hurt their business.
The bottom line is the industry will shrink, and it could shrink down to nothing.
Why the Premier is facing tough questions. And a door is closing to Ukrainians fleeing the war.
It's not a slight change, it's a very big change.
Why there's such a rush to get to Canada. And Tim Hortons employees go the extra mile for one man's double-double.
I had the feeling they might have done this before.
We're back in 2. Well, there's some controversy tonight in Nova Scotia, where some of the province's vineyards are accusing the Premier of favoring their larger competitors. Kayla Hounsell now with why an infusion of cash has uncorked a heated debate.
Nova Scotia is proud of the wine industry it's spent decades growing. Now many of those who grow the grapes say the provincial government is about to destroy it.
The bottom line is the industry will shrink, and it could shrink down to nothing.
The province plans to give the big commercial wine producers who bottle wine in Nova Scotia funding believed to be worth millions. But their grapes don't have to be locally grown. Small farm wineries say it will allow those bigger companies to buy cheaper grapes abroad, produce more, and charge less, and they won't be able to keep up.
It causes job loss. It causes vines not being grown in the ground.
The Premier is sparring with reporters.
I'm going to stop you, though. I don't know if I can stop you because you're...
But there's some history here. 6 years ago, Australia complained to the World Trade Organization that Canada and some of its provinces were breaking international trade agreements. Nova Scotia, Australia said, was offering local companies breaks that discriminated against imported wines. Nova Scotia agreed to stop by 2024. But wineries and the opposition say bottling wine doesn't have anything to do with that trade issue.
We do know that one of the owners of these companies is a fundraiser for the Premier and a very close friend and associate.
Reporters asked the Premier about that relationship.
This particular gentleman, is he a friend?
I know him. I know. Are you a friend?
Another wine bottling facility in Nova Scotia is owned by the Ontario-based Peller Estates.
What happened was when the Australian WTO complaint was made, they came back to us and said, how do you think we should resolve this? And we said, we think you should support the local industry. Here's how you can do it.
The farm wineries say the government did not ask them that question, but they hope it still will. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
A lifeline for many Ukrainians is coming to an end.
There is always a chance that after 5 years or 6 years in Canada, you might have to go home.
The scramble to get here and stay here, next. But first, Rosie's here with that issue. Hello, you.
Hey, Adrian. Tonight, we're going to talk about Saskatchewan and Ottawa's ongoing battle over the carbon tax.
If Premier Scott Moe decides that he wants to start breaking laws and not respecting federal laws, then measures will have to be taken.
How far is Ottawa willing to go to make sure Saskatchewan actually pays up? Andrew Althea and Kelly Kreiderman join me to talk about that and more.
Well, this isn't just a rare sight, it is a first, at least in recorded history. Never before has a bald eagle nest been documented in Toronto. A resident spotted the pair of eagles in December.
It's incredible. There's no words to describe it. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing.
Eagles were considered endangered in Ontario for a very long time. Experts blame hunting and an insecticide which caused their eggs to crack easily. So this is being celebrated as a big win. A crucial deadline is fast approaching for Ukrainians who fled to Canada to escape the dangers of the war. As Georgie Smythe shows us, if they want to extend their visas, time is running out.
Thank you.
A new life in Canada begins with paperwork.
Bye, have a good day.
The emergency visa program that brought more than 200,000 Ukrainians to Canada is ending this month. Anyone approved needs to be in the country before March 31st, and Ukrainians are arriving in their thousands.
I come here because a program is finished, and I think it's important to do it because it's a really good change.
Worked very hard to
support groups like this church are noticing an uptick because come April 1st, it'll become harder for Ukrainians to travel here.
It puts us in line with any other individual from many other countries in the world. So it is a very different, it's not a slight change, it's a very big change.
Andrei Batitsky and his wife Katerina Bondarenko arrived in Canada 4 months after Russia invaded their country.
We just built everything to have a good life in Kharkiv. In one moment
everything is destroyed. I don't.
They're still adjusting to the pleasures and pressures of life here.
Take a look my credit history. You will understand how it's tight. Yeah, it's really tight.
Working several jobs while trying to extend their visa for another 3 years.
I will try to apply for a PR card because, when you have a permanent resident status in Canada, it looks like you are human.
Some Ukrainians have an easier path to permanent residency if a member of their family is already a citizen. Immigration lawyers say for most, options to stay longer are limited.
You just have to be mindful that there is always a chance that after 5 years or 6 years in Canada, you might have to go home.
Yeah.
For this young couple, it's a possibility difficult to imagine as war grinds on. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now it's time to break down the week in politics. It's Thursday, which means Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue this week, a new salvo and heated rhetoric over the federal carbon tax. Saskatchewan says it won't pay up. Ottawa says that's breaking the law.
It's irresponsible and it's frankly immoral on his part. We can have disagreement about things like climate change, but to be so reckless is unspeakable, really.
If the decision is immoral in Saskatchewan, that means it's immoral in the Latter County. And so that it's disappointing.
What's to be made of the battle, the ongoing battle between Saskatchewan and Ottawa? What measures might the federal government take to enforce the tax? Hello there, I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down tonight. Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, and sitting in for Chantal tonight, Kelly Kreiderman. Good to see all of you. Maybe I'll start with you, Andrew. What do you make of the way Minister Guilbeault has responded? Obviously, he's not the only minister that's talked about this issue, and there does seem to be some question of how Ottawa is actually going to respond. But for now, calling this decision immoral, how do you think that contributes to where we are with this?
Well, I think we want to be careful not to both sides this. We can all be critical of the way the federal government has handled the carbon price file generally, and particularly the carve out for home heating oil, which I think is widely and rightly seen as being a sop to their Atlantic Canadian base. All that's true, and maybe they're guilty of hypocrisy or what have you. But we cannot have governments of all people in this country who are supposed to be framing and enforcing the laws stepping outside them. People would like to say, Guilbeault himself in his past used to engage in illegal stunts to make a point as a Greenpeace campaigner, but he wasn't in the government of Canada at the time.
No, he wasn't.
So I do think that we have to draw a line here. That the government of Saskatchewan has agency. It's not an automaton. It can make choices. It can make choices to make its protests within the law of the land, and to be stepping outside of this. And it's far from the only province that's been doing this, of course. We've got Alberta with this cockamamie Alberta sovereignty thing, which is clearly outside the law. You've got Quebec presuming to be able to rewrite drafts of the sections of the Constitution unilaterally, which is clearly unconstitutional. This is getting out of hand, and whether Guilbeault is the right man and the right message to be handling this is another question, but I can't fault him for at least the emotion behind it.
But the Saskatchewan government is trying to make what they believe, and what many people believe, Althea, is a legitimate point. So, I mean, yes, they're going to extremes to do that, but they are trying to find a way to get the federal government to respond, because so far they haven't agreed to any further carve-outs.
What the Saskatchewan government is doing is blatantly illegal. It's not a perception of it being illegal or not. It's not like the debate we're having over whether or not to use the notwithstanding clause preemptively or not. It is clearly illegal. Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew has said publicly that the advice that he received was taking the similar action is also illegal. The government of Saskatchewan has gone to the Supreme Court to fight Ottawa on the imposition of the carbon tax, and they may disagree about, the exception on home heating, which does actually apply in Saskatchewan as well. It applies across the country, but it lost that battle, and we do live in a society where the rule of law should be upheld, and it's really disappointing. And I agree with Stephen Guilbeault. It is irresponsible. I'm not sure I would call it immoral. Those are his words. I'm not sure I would use that. But it is irresponsible. What message does it send the people of Saskatchewan. If you don't like a law, you can break it. You don't want to pay your income tax, you disagree with the government, go ahead, break the law. That's, the government is siding on the side of anarchy, and it's not lost, I think, on any of us that there is an election in Saskatchewan in October, and that the Premier would very much like to stick it to Justin Trudeau. They're kind of battling it out in the polls at the moment. And fighting with the federal government is always a win, but they know it's illegal. They know it's illegal because they have tried to protect the board of Sask Energy from criminal prosecution. We don't know what the government is going to do yet, but Stephen Guilbeault has said clearly the government has to do something, and they cannot allow provinces to break the law.
Well, I mean, Minister Wilkinson has said, we don't want to go down the path of handcuffing the minister here. Like that, creating a martyr around carbon tax probably is not what the federal government wants to do either, Kelly. But it does seem like things are kind of stuck in terms of how far they are willing to go to make their point to Saskatchewan.
It is a bit of a stalemate, and absolutely what Saskatchewan is doing is illegal. And I think the indications that we're hearing from Minister Wilkinson is that they will be hit with a fine or some kind of clawback of transfer payments. And I think you can disagree with the tactics of the Saskatchewan government, but also feel that they're also, bringing up a fair point about the way that the carbon pricing has evolved since the Supreme Court decision in 2021, since the federal Liberals said a floor on carbon pricing wouldn't be moved and then just suddenly moved for Atlantic Canada. I think there is a question of blatant unfairness. And I was thinking back to the days 25 years ago when I came back to Alberta, and there was farmers fighting the Canadian Wheat Board, and they were getting arrested for crossing the border and selling their wheat or grain. We are talking about a government here. We are not talking about a group of deeply unhappy farmers. We are talking about a government, and forever, any citizen of Saskatchewan will be able to look at the Saskatchewan Party and say, hey, you fought the law, I'm not going to pay my taxes. That is the big risk they're taking here. But it is going to be hard for Canadians for many Canadians to get upset about this, given the issue of fairness. And I also think given the issue of the way that the loss of political support on the carbon pricing issue, which is, of course, a different issue than the law, but it does contribute to how the Liberals are able to maneuver on this.
Yeah, well, talk to me about that, Andrew, then, because Kelly makes a point. Like, you don't want to make this into a bigger issue than they already have. So how do you respond and respond to the fact that it is illegal, but you do understand that people are upset?
Well, I think the point is well taken. You don't want to create martyrs. At the same time, you also want to emphasize this is not just a usual argy-bargy between the feds and the provinces. So withholding transfer payments, et cetera, that is helpful. Yeah, that's one way of affecting it. But I think there also has to be some way of making a point that this is stepping outside some pretty fundamental norms. Our neighbors to the south are entering a very perilous period. Where they are going to be, there's the real potential for lawlessness, political lawlessness in that country. We've always prided ourselves in this country as being a bit more law-abiding, a bit more orderly. That would not be a high bar to meet at this point. But it's a little distressing to see us going down closer towards that kind of road. We've just had the discussion vis-a-vis the Ottawa convoy that we needed to have an even hand. We needed to have commitment to the rule of law on all sides. That people quite rightly said, why are you getting so mad at us in the convoy when you weren't getting mad at people for blockading railways? And the correct answer to that was, well, let's not let any of that happen. Let's have a commitment that we resolve our disputes peacefully and lawfully in this country. And to have a government, I'll repeat the point, stepping outside the law is just disgraceful.
Althea, about 30 seconds to you.
I mean, to Andrew's point, peace, order, and good government. You may think we don't have a good government, but it doesn't give you the right to not support order. So I do share Andrew's point about the sort of Americanization of our politics. When you look down south at what's happening in Congress, you have a number of representatives who don't seem at all interested in abiding by the norms that, have long been We did not get to this level of democracy because it was an easy ride. People fought very hard for us to have strong institutions, to have the rule of law, and behavior like this all hits at that.
Last word to you, Kelly.
I just point out I'm more interested, I agree with the points on law and the rule of law in the United States, but we are seeing even a movement among states in the U.S. that, maybe might even be following Canada's lead or Western Canada's lead in some respects in terms of distancing themselves from a central government. So I think those ideas flow back and forth over the border.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. Thanks for that. Good part of the conversation. When we come back, we'll discuss the Winnipeg lab leaks.
This is a grave and serious matter that requires a parliamentary committee to examine.
Conservatives say the Liberals are again shutting down attempts to find out more about what happened at Canada's top infectious disease lab. Is more transparency needed? That's next. At issue, allegations of a cover-up. The Conservatives are demanding more answers about what happened at the National Microbiology Lab and why it took so long to reveal a trove of intelligence documents that detail why 2 scientists were fired, accused of sharing information with China.
We need to understand why we didn't get these documents 3 years ago. We've lost 3 years in examining this matter because there was an overclassification of these documents and Parliament didn't get the information it should have gotten.
So is there a need for further investigation into what happened at that lab? Let's bring everybody back. Andrew, Althea, and Kelly. Althea, why don't you start us off out here? It did take a long time, in part because there was no agreement on the process to look at these documents. They have finally now been basically made public, but there's still lots of questions. There's more questions, I would say, now that we have the documents. Do you think that the government has been fair enough in their approach to sharing this information, given national security concerns?
Fair is a hard question. The reason it's not, like, all the opposition parties agree that these governments needed to be seen, which is why the Speaker ruled to have the documents, and then the government decided to sue the Speaker to prevent the documents from being released. And when you realize that PHAC overly redacted the documents, and then the Liberals, it was a good thing. We should credit them for following the kind of Afghan model plus, I think, because of the jurists there that were weighing the national security concerns as well. We had a nice example, actually, of all parliamentarians working together to bring to light the documents that we saw last week, which are shocking. And absolutely, I agree with Michael Chong that parliamentarians should absolutely look at what's been revealed in the documents. I think we take security incredibly not seriously enough. We are much too lax with security, and this is one thing that is really quite disturbing from the documents. But I will say that I don't know, it's hard to distinguish the partisan gamesmanship from the actual interest to the public. Like what we saw this week with the Conservatives at the Ethics Committee, where they are there because they have a Conservative chair, so there's an opposition majority. This debate probably should be happening at the Canada-China Committee, but that has a Liberal chair. But that is where the impetus for all these documents started for. So I do think there are questions of accountability. We still don't know who knew what, when, what they did about it in the government, why it took so long for this information to be released. And I don't think that we can forget the context at the time, which is the Meng Wanzhou detention and the 2 Michaels and possible, hyper sensitivity in the government about what to do with regards to China and any backlash they might face.
It's curious to me, Andrew, though, that the Liberals are still shutting down attempts at I'm trying not to be naive here, but to shut down attempts at committee to discuss this, because you would think that after this long, they would understand that transparency actually might help them as a government to answer questions and to put it all on the table. You would think. Well,
first of all, what's in the documents is utterly scalding. This may well be the most serious national security breach in the history of the country. You had basically the government of China setting up a cell within our most top security bio research lab involving some of the most lethal viruses known to man, and sending out information over to China, bringing in people including people from the People Liberation Army to research there. The whole thing is absolutely shocking, and it's only going to get more shocking, I imagine, the more we'll delve into it. So they still probably have an interest in trying to obstruct that. But let's be clear, the bedrock convention of our system of government is that the government is accountable to Parliament. It's not accountable to Parliament if it agrees to be or subject to certain conditions. It is accountable to Parliament. When Parliament demands documents, one of the other most bedrock convention is the government has to yield them. Yeah. It doesn't get to say, wait a minute, we think national security is involved, or maybe it's privacy, or maybe it's some other matter. That's for Parliament to decide, and parliamentarians. So I'm not particularly enamored of the process that got us here. It was messy and ugly and wrong and unconstitutional. Thank God we have finally seen it 3 years too late, and probably too late to do much about, you know, the people involved. But we certainly need to learn much more about how this happened, why it took so long to bring these people to find out what the people were doing, and certainly we need to confront this weakness in our institutional mechanisms that we can't actually call our governments to account.
Well, and to better protect Canada from future attempts, right, to be influenced by other countries. I mean, Althea mentioned the Afghan detainee situation that happened under Stephen Harper. In that situation, in my mind and in my memory, it was very painful for the government until they released the documents. It actually helped the government once the documents were out because people had at least a better sense of what they were dealing with. Kelly.
Yeah, I don't understand the reason at this point for bringing any political attention to the fact that you're trying to stop any process from happening at this point. You know, I keep sticking on Michael Chong's words about things being overclassified, and, you know, perhaps Andrew's absolutely right that there are worse things to come out. But I think at this point, if you are talking about cutting through partisan political lines and acting in the name of national security, to me it would be better to be more forthcoming on the threat that existed for Canada, for the lab, for some of our research secrets. And I think, you know, there has to be an acknowledgement that the Liberals have talked about that things have changed politically so quickly since 2018, 2019 for sure. In terms of the threat assessment. But there comes a point where that starts to ring hollow and you need to start acting in a more grown-up way, even getting past some of the really divisive arguments of the pandemic and the discussion about, you know, people in committee chastising Michael Chong for even bringing up the Wuhan lab because that was connected to so-called conspiracy theories at the time. And I think getting past that thinking and to a more grown-up thinking on foreign affairs is really important at this point, and it will cut down conservative arguments that the Liberals are holding back on this.
Andrew, you want in there, and then quick last word to Althea.
Can I just say, this line that Mark Holland was putting out that, 2019 was a simpler time, we didn't know what China was up to. The two Michaels were languishing in a Chinese jail at the time in 2019. So let's not kid ourselves
on
here.
Espionage?
People knew. People knew that what China was up to.
Yeah, and the kind of things that they would do to retaliate. Althea, last word to you.
I think one of the questions that comes out of this is more of a processy question, but, you know, we are supposed to have a national parliamentarian committee that looks at national security. Yep. And clearly it isn't working properly. The Conservatives do not want to actively participate because they feel like they're being gagged if they do. We should have the ability, and by we I mean Parliament should have the ability to compel documents from the government and have its own body internally that redacts things. We should have a system that allows parliamentarians to access documents without relying on the bureaucracy that has its own agenda, and we can never forget that. The bureaucracy also has its own agenda.
Okay, smart conversation there. Thank you all. Thanks for being here on this Thursday. With that, I'll send things back to Adrienne, and she's in Toronto.
Thank you, Rosie. Next, a coffee run gets a little bit trickier for Saskatchewan Matt.
When you really want your double-double.
Right? The Tim Hortons employees who ran to his rescue in our moment. Oh dear, what you're looking at is a man who got his truck stuck in the drive-thru of a Tim Hortons in Saskatchewan. So that's definitely not pleasant, especially in the morning when all you want is a cup of coffee. Lucky for him, Tim Hortons employees jumped into action. The classic Canadian kindness is our moment.
When you really want your double-double.
right?
I just thought it was so funny and so classic Canadian. I was just getting my coffee in the Tim Hortons lineup, and the poor guy in front of me couldn't get any traction. It was pretty slippery. Well, the guy did give it a valiant effort to try to get out on his own, but he was holding up the drive-thru. Pretty soon, the Tim Hortons staff came out, big smiles on their face. I had the feeling they might have done this before. Of course, I'm a journalist, so I thought I should record this.
This guy needs his coffee.
He really needs his coffee.
Yeah.
But you can't just record it. You have to get out and help.
Okay, I'll help.
So I did help give a push. Didn't take long. The guy was on his way. He got his coffee. We all had a good laugh.
Thank you.
I don't know how he takes his coffee, but he needed a coffee. That's all that matters.
Good old Bonnie Allen, a CBC reporter. She says, I'm a farmer's daughter. I was absolutely going to help, but she's a multitasker too, and so she was able to record. She doesn't want to throw him under the bus. Still wondering what kind of tires he had, though. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.